You realize if you take Mark to dinner in Boca that Rob and I are like, we're listening, we're here.
Well, you're welcome to come down here anytime you like. Coach always trying to rain on my parade. Why you in my compliments? Why you in on my dinners, bro?
What do they say? What did Deion say? We're keeping receipts, brother.
Keep those receipts, man.
Light it.
Welcome to the Triple Option presented by Wendy's. Try Wendy's new Frosty Fusions with flavors like Caramel Crunch, Oreo Brownie, and Pop-Tart Strawberry.
Light it.
Bruce wasn't moving either.
We are back.
You guys have theme music now?
Yes, we've been
a random
theme
voice
music.
from the back. Bruce, stand by. We haven't even introduced you
I'm
yet.
sorry.
I love it. I love it. Rob Stone, Mark Ingram, Urban Meyer here with you. Yeah, Bruce Feldman will join us in a second. As always, thanks for joining us. Please rate, subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as across social media. We can be found at 3X Option Show. New episodes coming your way every Wednesday on YouTube or wherever it is you get your podcasts. Today, we're going to get you up to speed with our friend Bruce Feldman after one of maybe the biggest changes in college athletics ever. We'll hear about that and a whole lot more, including the playoff system, with the Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark a little bit later in the show. Then we are going to preview LSU's season and take a look at this year's College Football Hall of Fame candidates. I'm looking at you, Mark Ingram, the second. But our lead topic, it was launched on Friday as a California court granted approval to NCAA's landmark 3 antitrust cases, bringing in a new era for college sports in which athletes can be paid by their schools. A lot to digest. Here are your basic headlines. Student athletes going back to 2016 to 2024, they are eligible for a portion of $2.8 billion.
I got questions, Stone.
Wait, hold on a second.
I got questions.
Oh, you got a question because you're not 2016,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I got it.
Yes.
As of July 1st, schools can pay players on their roster. That's any sport. There is a cap, however, which will be 22% of revenue, which is projected to be about $20.5 million for this season. Schools, they can do whatever they want with that money. They can spread it however they see fit. That's going to be a big talking point. And there are escalators in place, so that number will get bigger over the course of a 10-year deal. Yeah, guess what? It's just a 10-year deal. We're going to have to deal with this again at some other point. And then the new College Sports Commission will oversee enforcement with the help of a Deloitte-run NIL clearinghouse, not the NCAA. Coach, I know you've got plenty to say about that in just a moment. But to help us answer some of these questions, work through some of the semantics, we welcome in, finally, properly, our good friend from Fox Sports and The Athletic, Bruce Feldman. Good morning, Bruce. Good to have you, buddy.
Hi, Bruce. You ready?
I'm ready. I got all your.
All right.
I hope I got some of your answers because I don't know.
All right. So we had James Franklin on recently, and he was incredible, and he enlightened us. I read a lot of this stuff, and to be honest with you, I'm about as cynical as you can imagine with it nonsense. When I started hearing people say, well, now there's rules. Bruce, for 38 years, I took a test every year. I signed a piece of paper saying we're going to follow the rules that we'd pass the test. You had to study a 3-inch or 4-inch rule book, and we would get tutoring from our compliance people. So the rules, it wasn't a question if there were rules. No one followed them. I shouldn't say no one. A lot of people followed them. Some people made a decision not to, and it would drive coaches crazy. So that's the first part. Second part is enforcement was comical. Comical might be the nicest word I've ever used with that. It was absolutely ridiculous. When people would commit major violations and 4 years later, they'd punish the team that had nothing to do with the violations. So here's the question for you. This College Sports Commission, James Franklin, broke the rock yesterday when he said that there is subpoena power and you're going to sign a piece of paper saying that you will not litigate. So Tom Mars, the famous attorney that basically I credit him with destroying the NCAA, because everything was litigated, is no longer. So it's going to be expedited enforcement, tough enforcement, and it's subpoena power. That means they're going to subpoena people immediately to get to the bottom of it. I'm still cynical. What do you hear on that word?
I talked to some coaches, Urban, who within the last 2 days who are very cynical as you are, as honestly as we all are, because we've been paying attention for a long time. You're taking, um, one head coach I talked to at a power conference said, "I don't know why right after this went through, they did not have the 64 power conference head coaches and their ADs on a Zoom call with Brian Seeley. That is the former MLB executive who has now been in charge and is basically the executive of this organization, overseeing what is essentially is compliance. Because right now, he said different schools have different interpretations of the
Wow.
rules, which
Here we go.
Urban, when you mentioned compliance a bit ago, that was always one of the issues. I mean, I would go back to, and I don't know if you were still in the SEC at this point, but there was a prominent school with a very successful head coach. And I remember other coaches who had been, had talked to people who'd worked there who said, you know what, their compliance directors never shows up at any of the practices to see who's actually coaching, who isn't, all these other things. So there's always been bending of the rules. I think one of the harder parts from this, from the people I've talked to over the weekend, was gonna be, you have all these middlemen and agents who are now been in the process, right? Because we've had, 5 years of NIL. A lot of those guys aren't regulated. A lot of those people aren't regulated like they are. Mark had an NFL agent. That was a regulated person who
Right.
answered somebody. A lot of these folks really haven't. And they're also getting 20%. Mark wasn't getting,
Wow.
imagine, like, a lot of them are getting 20% of
The
if
uncertified agent is getting 20%.
20%, yeah. And so what you end up with is coaches and administrators saying, "Wait, we have like 5 days to turn all this paperwork in. We're gonna chase after." Like, I guarantee you, because the head coach I talked to yesterday said, "I don't know every deal my players have done." NIL wise. We don't know. Just like my AD doesn't know every speaking engagement I've done. So I think it's a good idea in practice. We're gonna see it's gonna be really messy. It was messy before, like Urban. I could see you were nauseous when you talked about the NCAA investigative part. That's exactly where I think this is headed. Maybe there's more teeth behind it, but they thought they had teeth behind it before, and it didn't really hold up. So we'll see.
What's amazing, Bruce, is that, and I told this before on a podcast with Mark and Rob, is that the template is pretty well set. You want to end something, you make it ridiculously, the punishment so hard that people won't do it. That's only been that way for 3,000 years. So I don't get why that's hard to figure out. The steroids used to be a big deal in college football. You know what happened, Bruce? They said you're finished if you use steroids. And for the most part, steroids are out. I know there's still stuff out there, but not like it was when I played. So, number two, and then I'll hand it off to the other guys. Number two, Bruce, you start hearing a billion. And once again, the skepticism in me, just in being around college football for 38 years, 2.8 billion. It can be 9 billion. Who cares? When does Braxton Miller get a check? Who's the check from? And is it a legitimate check, or is this
And
all
why
just
doesn't Mark
going to
Ingram get a
disappear?
check?
And
I don't know.
we're gonna appeal
Was
Mark
Braxton
Ingram.
in that window? Was he done it before 2016 though?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll
I mean,
use
bad example, but yeah, I get
I'll
where
use
you're.
I'll
Yeah,
use Chase Young then, or
yeah, good.
someone,
I mean,
or
look, and
Joey
Chase,
Sorrentino. A guy that was a walk on.
And why doesn't
yeah,
Mark Ingram get a check?
I think it's hard for them to manage as far back into that window, because then if it's you, Mark, then all of a sudden, Urban, you were a safety at Cincinnati way back when. Should Urban have gotten some money? Rob was a high level safety
Yes.
He's got a
We
player.
should
picture
all get
behind
some
him. Look,
money.
he's got a picture behind him.
That's right.
So seriously, let's go again. Okay, say I'll give you a name. It was a 16. So
Chase Young, Mike
Curtis
Thomas,
Samuel. When does the check show up, and how much will it be, and who writes it?
Honestly, on how long it takes them to go through, because we're talking about thousands of athletes. I
Right.
don't know how that process is going to get expedited. I'd be lying if I told you how quickly, because I think right now, a lot of the people I've talked to are so focused on how does this work with the NIL bubble that's already out there, and how does this work going forward? The back money, which you think, okay, people are going to come forward who are in that window and say, go to their universities and say, okay, Who do I have to talk to get that? I don't know how they streamline that process, to be honest. That's something that, hasn't come up in the conversations I've had.
I'm about to sue their ass.
You won't be the first or the
You won't be the
last.
first, you won't be the last. Exactly.
All right. Anyways, but Stone, I mean, Bruce, man, we appreciate you appreciate you coming to, parlay with us, man. And we know we've been expecting this. We know some schools have been preparing for this. We know some schools are gladly going to be using that 20.5 to pay their players. Now, will all schools be required to pay their players? And like, what if they don't want to pay? Like, do they get to opt out? Like, what goes on with schools who
Well,
are
you'll get
against
left
this?
behind, and I think at that point, a lot of your student athletes are gonna be like, "Hey, do I really wanna go to school there where I can get a better deal someplace else?"
Right.
If they can make it work, and I think what you could see is other schools who cannot financially make it work, maybe, and 10 years from now, 'cause as Rob said, there's a 10-year deal here. Are there way less programs playing major college football at the end of it? Is it a sustainable model for them? I think that's the part that's going to be interesting. There's a lot of levels to that, and that's another piece of it that I think will be fascinating to see who can hold up and who can't.
And now the 20.5, they said over 10 years, this thing can increase. So this is like next year it could be 25 million. In 3 years, it could be 30 million. This is like a increasing
It's all on
salary cap like the
escalators and
NFL.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I think the part that is significant, and this is again something that was brought up by an administrator I talked to last night, which was this all kicks in soon, July 1st. It's less than a month away. There's a lot of schools, and maybe it's 15, maybe it's 50, it's probably more like 15, who have been working ahead. So, there's one school I've heard of in the SEC. They already have like a 30 to $35 million NIL budget that is kicked in. Maybe they hold off on the 15 million that they're expected of that 20 million that they're expected to take from revenue share, and hold that for January 1 and say, hey, we already got our roster allotment signed up from the NIL balloon we have in our NIL group. So maybe we hold off till Jan 1 when we can start really haggling to get what we need for our next year's roster. I think that is something it'll be interesting to see who strategizes that way, how they handle what they have in NIL, because it seems like it's a different pot of money. And I think that's the part that is going to be the hardest for Brian Seeley and the NIL Go people to kind of sort out.
So we introduced the College Sports Commission to the landscape. What exactly does the NCAA still do with college football?
I mean, they didn't do that much with college football as they did to like college basketball, right?
Right.
I mean, Urban, somewhere you have trophies. I don't think they say NCAA on it. It's not like, if you had, I think you were at Florida when Billy Donovan won basketball championships, right? Different
Right.
trophy. The NCAA ran that. The NCAA runs, lacrosse and soccer and everything else. The NCAA
Yeah.
wasn't that involved. It was involved in the enforcement piece of it. But as you said earlier, Rob, right now they're not in the enforcement business as it relates to this. So their role has gotten further and further diminished. And I think that's only going to keep happening as the TV money and the power structure, the power conferences have more influence. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Like Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey are the ones who are really
Yeah.
running everything at this point. And I think the NCAA and Charlie Baker can talk about whatever he wants to talk about. But I think people know when it comes to college football, it's a different deal than it is for every other college sport.
Yeah, for sure. And
I
Bruce,
want
you-
to. Oh, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead,
Go
Coach.
I'm mesmerized by this because I lived it and I spent hours in our compliance office and it was dead to rights. They did it and nothing ever happened. So the whole thing about enforcement again, you had 3 schools recently get involved in some pretty egregious, so-called, I'm not going to call the schools out, but pretty egregious violations. And the reason that took place is because they probably laughed at the compliance. They laughed at the fact that if we got caught, who cares? It's a joke. Uh, is there, in fact, subpoena power? Start there.
That if they get behind it, because if it's something they've agreed to with courts, because I think what the biggest concern with all this is lawsuits are coming. right?
Right.
And so I think that part of it, meaning, okay, are we going to be protected? You can sue anybody for anything in this country, right? And it doesn't mean you're going to win, but I think we're going to see more of that. And there used to be Urban, like, and I think this still holds with the NCAA. If you get caught lying to the NCAA, the NCAA could come down. That was, to me, the worst crime you get. That was it was always the cover up was worse than the crime. If you get caught what they think lying to the NCAA was a lot more damning to them than what some of the infractions may have been.
We're going to find
So
out.
yeah, and again, I think right now, again, this is right from a power four head coach who was like, we haven't been on any Zooms. They haven't told us our
Wow.
interpretation of what this is seems to be different than other coaches in our conference. And that this coach was super frustrated. He was like, you know what? There's a model that where really would work well, and it works well at the highest level, and that's the NFL model. And like if you talked about cheating and steroids and different things, like there are hefty fines and punishments if you have too physical a practice in the NFL, or about 18 other things that Mark could probably talk to you about that he lived through in the last 10 years. And the NFL model has done that, but it's done through collective bargaining. And I
Right.
think I know we talked about this the last time I was on the show. There's a lot of people who feel like that's where this is headed,
Yes.
because they said the powers that be, they may want to go up, like to have the politicians involved, but they laugh at that because like the politicians barely can handle what they're supposed to be doing in Washington, D.C. They don't know to go down these rabbit holes. They haven't lived it. They don't know it. And so now all of a sudden you're going to try to get them to handle something that they're in the dark about?
So number two, number one, we just discussed subpoena power. So subpoena power only happens if, and this is my second question, you just mentioned it. Unionization, that means all Power Four conferences, directed through their commissioner, is going to sign. And James Franklin said this is probably through the presidential level, then the AD, then the coach. But the president's going to sign and saying, we are in. That means we are now unionized as far as compliant. I'm just focused on the compliance piece right now. That means we will not, so we give up the power to sue the guy's name from the College Football Commission. Uh, Will that, and like you said, if that doesn't happen, I'll tell you what, the skepticism in college sports is gonna be through the roof, because if they've worked so hard on this and no one's then it's a joke, and
Yeah, I
I'm
think
worried
that
about
part
it.
I've heard is the presidents at each university are signing off on that. But that doesn't protect anybody from the lawsuits. Let's say, it's 15 years earlier and Mark Ingram's a great running back, a young running back at Alabama. And what is fair market value? Mark Ingram has somebody representing him. Those are where the lawsuits, I think, are coming hard, because who's to say, you basically, if somebody's willing to pay for him to be the face of their company, no one's stopping, Joe Burrow or anybody else who are professional athletes about, oh, is that too much money? Is that too much money for
Right.
Ant-Man's shoe? Is that, like
I
all
got
these
you.
kinds of
I
different
got
deals?
you.
That's where all the lawsuits, I think, are coming. And again, when I referenced the 20% that some of the commission that these agents are taking, this has become a great business for them. Now all of a sudden you're going to tell them that the water faucet's getting turned off. I don't think that's going to happen as easily as, not, because again, this is the United States where people feel like, it's capitalism, and if you're saying you can't do that, you can't make so much money, or that deal is getting paid too much. Again, I think there'll be a lot of lawsuits coming down the pipeline very soon.
The last thing, Bruce, before we let you go, this 20.5 million was supposed to be like kind of, even keel, level the playing field, so everyone has to operate by the same rules. But this NIL, you could still have like an advantage above everyone else because you can raise more money through your collective and your NIL still too. So like, what's the role NIL plays with this new 20.5 million that cap
Yeah,
that they
it's
have?
right now it's a little vague because some schools I've heard are not going to have their collectives and some still will. And if that is still the case, and I just think right now, look, it came up a lot last year. Ohio State had a roster of 20 million. They won a national title. A lot of that went to money to retain players, not to recruit. There were some of them obviously that certainly were added, but I think Now we're talking about rosters that are 35, 40 million for this coming season where we're going to be out all and watch some of these teams. It's 35, 40 million dollars. And a large part of that is NIL. I think people are crazy if they think you're going to tell college football coaches and ADs that, oh yeah, now you're paying that much money. Now it's going to go way back down to 20. That, things don't work that way. It's almost human nature. And again, I go back to something coach brought up at the beginning of this. We're talking about the most competitive people. And we're talking about like Tennessee, when they first got in, one of the bigger NIL deals we've ever heard of was Nico Iamaleava doing when he was in high school, a deal for close to $10 million. That was in part because Tennessee's fan base and Tennessee's power structure was so desperate and frustrated because they hadn't been winning. Right now, the biggest version of, I guess, like where we see Oregon and Phil Knight, the mega booster, you have Cody Campbell, a former Texas Tech offensive lineman who made billions in the energy business, is now funding his athletic department at Texas Tech. I don't think that's going away. I think this is a supplement, and I think that you're going to have a lot of people who are now figuring out how do we budget, because you have different schools have different number of athletic programs, right? Or athletic teams underneath their umbrella.
Bruce, rapid response. Is college football in a better place now than it was last week?
I think so, because there's a little bit of closure, but they have new problems now.
Yeah. Fair to say. Fair to say. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic, and of course, our friend at Fox Sports. As always, thanks for joining us. Love the intelligence, Bruce. Thanks, buddy.
See you guys
soon. Bruce, light it.
If you love Wendy's classic Frosty flavors, we have got some big news for you. There are all new Frosty Swirl and Frosty Fusion flavors. So, yeah, it's the same creamy treat that you've always loved, now with a flavor refresh. So what are these new flavors?
Well, Stoner, thanks for asking. There are a lot, so I'm just going to list them, okay? We've got the Frosty Swirls, strawberry, brownie batter, and caramel. Then we've got the blended Frosty Fusions, caramel crunch, Oreo brownie with swirl thick brownie batter sauce and crunchy Oreo cookie pieces, and Pop-Tarts, strawberry with a street strawberry sauce, and chunks of crazy good Pop-Tarts pieces.
You know your flavors. Not to mention that, yes, you can still get your classic vanilla. Try them all and find your favorite.
Are you going to be a strawberry swirl girl, a caramel craze fanatic, brownie batter buff, Pop-Tart strawberry fanatic, Oreo brownie stain?
These are all really, really good questions, Mark. Anyway, whatever flavor you're craving, odds are we've got a Frosty for it. So check in for sweet treat time with Wendy's. All new Frosty flavors. A refresh on a classic? Gotta be Wendy's. You all know what speed dating is, right? Well, if you're the owner of a growing business, what if there was a feature like speed dating, but only for hiring? In other words, you could meet several interested, qualified candidates at once, all at a designated time.
Well, good news. There is. It's Zip Intro from ZipRecruiter. You can post your job today and start talking to qualified candidates tomorrow. And right now, you can try Zip Intro for free at ZipRecruiter.com/option.
Zip Intro gives you the power to quickly assess excellent candidates for your job via back-to-back video calls. You simply pick a time and Zip Intro does all the work of finding and scheduling qualified candidates for you.
Enjoy the benefits of speed hiring with new Zip Intro, only from ZipRecruiter, rated #1 hiring site based on G2. Try Zip Intro for free at ZipRecruiter.com/option. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/option. Zip Intro. Post jobs today. Talk to qualified candidates tomorrow. All right, guys, a lot to digest this week. Coach, in the end, are you convinced that this next step, this settlement, is going to be good for college football?
Well, we've spoken to a lot of people, most recently or in depth with the Commissioner Yormark of the Big 12. And
yeah, that's coming up next.
40 years of being scarred of how not to take charge of compliance of your your people scars you. And so I think I speak on behalf of the majority of people that played and coached. Is like, wait, what? We've been signing our name every year for 40 years on we're going to be compliance or all hell's going to break loose, and it doesn't. And so there are a couple key points that I've said over and over and over again, is that subpoena power will change the game. That'll expedite. If you lie under subpoena and you put your hand up and say, if that's what they're talking about, then that's a problem. And I think the punishment should be so firm to the point you can't coach or play again. If you are subpoenaed and you lie intentionally, it's over. Your career is done. Watch what happens if that happens, Mark and Rob. It's over. I mean, everybody's going to be compliant. And then it can move on to something else that's more important than the silliness that has gone on. So I love everything I'm hearing. I really do. Am I skeptical? You're damn right I am.
Anything jump out at you, Mark?
Well, I think the main thing is now everyone has a set of rules and guidelines that has to level the playing field and everyone has to follow. We'll see whether, like Coach says, if somebody doesn't follow the rules, what happens. But I think that we're in a better place right now because we kind of finally have something that everyone can agree on. Everyone has agreed. Everyone has kind of went with the rules. There's a set of rules. There's a salary cap. Now, obviously, you have the other kind of fact of the NIL that can contribute with this, salary cap thing. But I think the fact that we have a set of rules, a set of guidelines that everyone has to follow across the board, I think that's a good place to start. Like we said, it's not going to be perfect, but I think that's a good place for us to start.
I want to clarify something real quick with you guys, that when I was a very strong proponent of the NCAA my entire career, because I understood what those people were up against. They had no subpoena power, and people lie. It was, and then every time they made a statement or a decision as far as enforcement, you know what happened, right? They got litigated and lost.
Yeah.
So this is not a direct hit to the NCAA. It's a direct hit on the system.
Yeah.
But how about this? How about how they got to put a value on your players now? What I mean? Like how much you're going to play your players? Like how do you know what this player is going to be, their valuation is? You know what I mean?
Well, I know when those roster numbers come out, players in the league, whatever league it is, are looking like he makes how much and I make where? That's life in any business. And you hope that doesn't carry through to the locker room. But there's going to be instances of that. But that's just like, hey, man, throw me the ball more, right? Give me more touches.
Two quick comments, and I know Mark will appreciate this. Is number one, can you imagine we're here in 2025? And it's right that we're here. For so long, I mean, I'm looking at a man right there, Mark Ingram, that the value he provided for that university was incredible. And I had, the amount of players I coached. I mean, throw dollar figures at Zeke and Nick Bosa and Tebow, et cetera. And coaches got paid. Athletic departments generated all this. Well, I understand it. I just can't imagine we're here.
Yeah, I'm glad that the young men and women get compensated for the value that they're providing to these universities.
Right.
I'm glad that
I just hope, Mark, I hope women's sports don't go away, brother. I know you got daughters.
Coach.
My two daughters.
Yep.
I have four
Olympic
daughters,
sports.
man.
Olympic sports are in danger, man.
My both girls played college sports, and you take away college volleyball from my daughters, that's a game changer, man. Remember Wardman, who just came out and said this is one of the most lucrative athletic departments in the country. They're expecting a significant shortfall because of the money, the distribution of money, and the scholarships moving up to 105.
The 5% for the quote unquote other sports, not not football, not men's and women's basketball. Maybe it takes those Olympic sports just back to where they used to be, Mark, right, when you and I were playing, Coach, when you were playing, where, hey, you know what? A scholarship is fantastic. Right. That's awesome. I'm going to school to get educated, become smarter, become a better human in society, and I get to play this sport as well. And you're going to let me go there for free?
Yes.
Again, back in my day, not to be the old guy mowing his lawn
that's what you played
in socks
for.
And sandals, but that's awesome. That's still a win.
That's what you played for when you played to get a scholarship and go to school and get an education.
Right?
My concern isn't that, because I think that is correct. And plus they can still, the gymnast at LSU can still make all the money she wants on Instagram and all that. What I'm worried about is just for budget costs, they bang the sports. That's what I'm concerned.
Agreed.
What I also love, Stoner, is
Yeah.
how this salary cap is 20.5 right now, right? But it can grow 4%
Escalators
a
up.
year
Yep.
through 10 years. And after 3 years, they can reevaluate the percentage. And so, like, basically, you have a salary cap that's growing very similar to the NFL. So players are going to get paid more and more as the years continue to go. So,
Three final things. This is certainly good for the Power Four.
yes.
Let's check in with the MAC and the AAC and the Mountain West and even the Pac-12 as it tries to bring itself back up. Where do they fall into the ecosystem right
They
now?
become the feeder system for the big boys. I mean, it's
Correct.
still
Correct,
beautiful
Coach.
football. MAC, I've coached there in 2 years. It was fantastic, Mark, because everybody had the same players. So it was really a coach's league. Some leagues, you got the best teams are so much better than the other teams, but it's a coach. But what happens, and I've talked to, Eddie George is my boy at Bowling Green now.
Bowling Green.
The reality is you're going to develop a player and he's going to leave.
You're a double A,
That's real.
you're a double A, or you're a triple A type team. Right now,
You develop a
to use
good
the
player,
baseball
And they're
parallel.
there
Yep.
now, and that'll be continued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part two, the Big East is going to be really interesting. And this is the college basketball part of my brain. They don't have major college football, but they have major college basketball.
Yes.
And those numbers are going to change. It'll be very curious to see where some of these great universities in the Big East, where they start moving and fluctuating in the grand scheme of just men's and women's college basketball, because they're going to get a lion's share of those revenue numbers pushed towards their programs, because football is not going to annihilate those numbers. And then you're going to have programs like a Stanford, a North Carolina, a UCLA. And I know there's others out there that excel in just about every sport, right? How are they going to break things down? What matters to them? There's going to be some universities out there that say, we need to be closer to 50-50, male and female sports. There's going to be other programs. Like, I would love to know what's happening at Stanford right now, because Stanford has dipped so significantly in the two big sports that matter money-wise, football and men's basketball. Do they say, you know what? We just got this influx of cash. Let's put all these chips into football. And we got to get our football program up, because if our football program is up, guess what? It raises everybody else up in our program.
Yes.
It's going to be amazing and fascinating to see how these programs handle things. Also, it's going to be interesting to see how conferences as a whole handle it. We're going to talk with one of our great friends, the commissioner of the Big 12, Brett Yormark, next on the Triple Option, presented by Wendy's.
Light it.
This postseason, BetMGM, authorized gaming operator of the NBA, is making first field goal score wagers more exciting with Second Chance. With BetMGM's Second Chance promotion, you'll get your stake back in cash if your first field goal score scores second instead. Yeah, that's right. Simply bet on any player to score the first field goal during any playoff game, any game, doesn't matter. And if you're right, you win. But if your pick scores second instead of first, you get your stake back, and you get it back in cash. Grab the chance at getting your stake back at BetMGM. See BetMGM.com for terms. This U.S. promotional offer not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. For New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. For Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. For Massachusetts, 1-800-327-5050. For Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. For Puerto Rico, 1-800-981-0023. For West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. Subject to eligibility requirements, in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. This week on the Triple Option, we bring in one of our great, great friends, whether it's with the Triple Option or over on Fox's Big Noon Kickoff, the commissioner of the Big 12, Brett Yormark. Always great to see you, Commissioner. Let's start right off the bat, though. Let's talk what's happening in college football. House versus NCAA. The settlement approval comes in on Friday. What was your first order of business?
Glad it was approved. I mean, listen, we've been waiting. It's been a waiting game for us for a long time. I think I can speak on behalf of my commissioner colleagues, but happy Judge Wilkins ultimately approved settlement. We're in a better place today as an industry than we've been in a long time. I mean, there's guardrails, there's rules of engagement, there's a new model. And as I often say to my board, my ADs, and anyone that'll listen, it's progress over perfection. It's going to be a little clunky. It's not going to be perfect coming out of the gates, but it's better than where we've been. And a lot of progress has been made. The implementation committee that has been preparing us for this moment, made up of practitioners across the industry, have worked tirelessly to make sure that, there's this new model in place that provides rules and that governs the future of collegiate athletics. So I'm excited about it. The hard work really begins now. I'll be with my commissioner colleagues next week, and we're going to roll up our sleeves and go at it. But excited that it was approved, and as I said, a lot of work to be done to be ready for July 1.
Hey, Commissioner, I speak on behalf of all us. One of our favorite people. Your
Yes.
energy,
Yes.
you bring it every week, and appreciate what you do for college football in your conference. So I'm jumping right into this because I'm fired up over this stuff and this compliance because I've dealt with it. And if the NCAA ever wanted to write a book on how not to investigate and how not to enforce, it'd probably be a bestseller. And it wasn't all. And I would always push back when I heard that because the NCAA, they went to a fight, Mark, with their left hand tied behind their back.
Yeah.
They were unable to subpoena. They would get, because it wasn't collective bargaining, it wasn't unionization, they just get sued, litigated, and they would lose. So I'm not a direct shot at the NCAA, just overall how it happened. I hear people say, actually, in the last 2 days, well, finally there's rules and finally there's guardrails. I was like, that's bullshit. I've been doing it for 38 years. There was rules, just they were unimportant. They didn't enforce them. So James Franklin told us that there's subpoena power, there's signing paperwork that says that you will not be able to litigate the decision by the commission. And this is all going to be driven through commissioners, through the president. I'm going to ask you about, can the college football fans and people in college football, this is a big word, expect and demand compliance?
Yes. And let me speak to that a little bit. So the College Sports Commission is the enforcement arm of settlement, effectively. We announced the new CEO that's coming on board, Brian Seeley. He has spent years at Major League Baseball. He's done a lot of investigative work. And I think he's the right person at the right time to lead this new effort. Coming from professional sports, I bring a little bit of a different perspective. I said it yesterday during our press conference. Our schools want rules, and they have them now. And the ramifications of breaking those rules will be very punitive. And that's the way we're going to govern moving forward. And I'm excited about it. Because, settlement in many respects should create a level playing field for everyone. And that's what we're signing up for. So I'm excited about the future. As I said, it's not going to be perfect, a lot of progress, but we are going to enforce. And schools have asked for rules. We're giving them rules. And I think Brian Seeley coming on board as the CEO is the right guy to enforce those rules as he builds out his staff.
One more question about that, and I'll hand it off to Mark here is, do you have to sign away a waiver or saying that we will not litigate once a decision? That's how the NFL model works, is that it's all collective bargaining. So when the commissioner makes a decision, you can't say, oh, screw you, I'm going to sue you. It's over. So the problem with college, and this is what the deterioration of compliance was, I witnessed it, because there is no teeth in the NCAA. The risk reward became comical. Are people going to sign away the right to litigate?
Well, you might have read yesterday because we discussed it a little bit during our press conference. There is what we call a participation agreement in this new model that all the schools are going to have to sign, which effectively codifies the rules of settlement, that they are going to live by these rules, okay, and understand the consequences if they don't. And each school that participates in rev share is going to have to sign that participation agreement.
It's over. Congrats. I wish we had that. Congratulations. Man, I hope it holds. That's great.
Brett, man, like I relate with Coach, man. We appreciate you, one of our favorite people, man. We always appreciate you being around, man. So thank you for your time again. Just want to ask you a little bit about this model, man. Like, will you be suggesting a model on how to distribute your money to your schools, and what would that look like if so? Or do you gonna let your schools operate independently?
we're going to let our schools determine how they want to rev share. It's going to be a school by school decision. Obviously, the revenue generating sports are going to receive a bulk of it. Okay.
Right.
But it really will be up to the schools and how they distribute what we call a permissive cap up to 20.5 million in year one. And many schools have been very public already about how they're going to distribute it. One of the models out there, not to say it's right or wrong, is 75, 15, 5, and 5. 75% to football, 15% to men's basketball, 5 to women's basketball, and 5 to other Olympic sports.
Mm.
But there are probably going to be variations of that model, and it'll be determined by the schools themselves.
Just one quick follow up to this cap. You say 20.5 in year one. Is there an anticipation to what type of growth you see in that cap each year? Like, what would that do? What do you anticipate that being?
Well, as part of settlement, there's a 4% increase every year.
Okay.
And then I want to say it's every 3 years we can go through a reset based on, the average amount of revenue that is being brought into the system, by the defending conferences. Okay. And it's 22.5% of
Mhm.
revenue. Okay. And that gets recalculated every 3 years. But it is 4% a year.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Commish, it's the last one, and I'll hand it off again. Ward Manual came out yesterday in a letter to the Wolverine faithful saying they were expecting a significant budget shortfall as a result of the revenue share and the scholarships. I go back to my time of a coach, and I mean, you'd fight for training table, you'd fight for gear, you'd fight for, and I'm talking about Florida and Ohio State. I'd fight for increasing a guy's salary that I needed him. And I'm wondering, where in the hell is all this money going to come from? And can we expect schools to drop sports? I think the Wolverines are going to drop 10% of their personnel in the administrative side. Are you going to expect your conference schools, or is that going to happen everywhere now?
Well, I will tell you this from a conference perspective, and I'll start with us at the Big 12. It's incumbent upon me to create more value for our member institutions. And as you guys know, I like to innovate. I want to be bold, and I want to find opportunities that create value for our membership, which ultimately means driving more revenue and distributing more revenue to our schools. So that's what I think about daily. I also think that schools are of that same and similar mindset. How do they create more value? How do they further commercialize their businesses in order to support some of these new expenses, which, of course, the big one being now rev share. But I also think they have to look at the expense side of the equation. We all have to be better operators. We're doing that here at the Big 12 conference also. There's a difference in what you need versus what you want. And I've
Mm.
always managed to that. You ask anyone on your staff, they want as much as you give them. But do they
Right.
really need that to be successful or not? And that's the question we need to ask each other. And we have to differentiate between what do you need to get the job done versus what do
Right.
you want?
Right.
And I'm not sure we thought about it in those terms previously, but we need to now. And we need to be in the value creation business. We have to do business differently. And we have to grow the pie. And while we're doing that, we also have to be mindful of expenses and what do we really need in order to be successful.
Yeah.
On that theme, I know you guys had dabbled with the concept of bringing in some private equity into the conference. And I know you said that now isn't the right time, but how did you envision that kind of looking and playing out? Because that opens up kind of another Pandora's box, I think, at times for at least for some concerned people.
So Rob, we took a deep dive, and we looked at everything. We looked at debt, traditional private equity. Where we landed and where we spent most of our time was creating a bespoke model, if you will, a custom model for the conference. And I was looking for different things, and so were my key stakeholders. Do we bring a strategic partner in that can help us grow our revenue, that brings strategic expertise in the right areas, while also serving as a capital partner if and when we need it? Okay. So I was looking at it a little differently because I didn't want to give anyone a stake in our conference. I'm very bullish on the future, and I don't want to give up any of our upside because we're in the growth mode right now. And I think the future is really bright for us. And I don't want to share that with any third party. But to the extent that I could identify, and I did, a strategic partner who also brings capital when we might or might not need it, to me was the right fit. We've pressed pause on that right now, but we've done enough due diligence to understand that if there was a moment in time where we wanted to go down a particular path, we know exactly where to go. And
Okay.
that's incumbent upon me as the commissioner to do my due diligence, to bring opportunities to the membership, and then determine if we do or don't do it.
Let's pivot to one of our favorite subjects, college football playoff expansion. I know you have a lot to say about this. And I just want to take you back to when the concept was out there not too long ago, where the Big Ten and the SEC had 4 guaranteed spots in expansion. This is going to 14 teams. The Big 12 and the ACC were only guaranteed 2. When you first saw that, model, what went through your head? What went through your heart?
I didn't like it. And obviously that model's been out there for almost a year now. And I didn't like it because I just felt that it created a huge divide between us and those 2 conferences. Now, as you guys know, I have good self-awareness. I know where we reside in the world of college football. But I just felt that it put a line in the sand that didn't need to be there. Okay. I'm a firm believer in that, if you create value, you should be rewarded, earn it on the field. Okay. Every year's a new year. And by the way, with settlement, in theory, it should be creating a level playing field across the board. Okay. So I didn't like it. Um, and it was somewhat foreign to me. And I was pretty outspoken during our spring meetings that, a 5-11 format was certainly something I liked. I like 16 because more access is good. Okay.
Yep.
There's a point where access, starts equating to dilution, but I don't think at 16 you're diluting anything. I think, it's a good number to work with. And, obviously the 5 AQs is what we have right now effectively. The five, highest rated conference champions. So felt comfortable with that format versus, every year knowing what someone already has and before you even, play the season. And I felt that it was in the best interest of those 2 conferences only and not in the best interest of the fans in college football. So I was outspoken about it. That being said, I've got a great relationship with my colleagues, within the Power Four. And I do believe that we will ultimately get to a place that is good for all of us. It might not be great for all of us, but it'll be good for all of us. And I think, I speak on their behalf also that we're committed to figuring out a solution. And I'll be with them next week. And I'm sure, CFP will be a topic of conversation, and we'll roll up our sleeves and we'll hopefully figure this out.
Commissioner, I was kind of a fan, not necessarily that the Big 12 and ACC got left out, but the 4-4-2-2-1-1 was appealing to me for one reason, and that is you eliminate the committee, basically. The committee now it's human error. I've been from BCS to the first college football playoff to the recent one. When I was coaching, I was involved in each one. And the committee, I would ask people actually when they left the committee how it was done, and to a man, everyone was like, a lot of them have no idea, they're not watching film because they really can't. Uh, and when they are watching film, what are they really watching? That's an acquired skill in my mind. I mean, it is. In the new formula that you made, I think you said 5-11, is there a way to eliminate the human error of the committee and say, once again, the 4-4-2-2 was 4 Big Ten, 4 SEC, 2 and 2 to the Big 12 and the ACC. The best thing I loved is there's play-in games. You play in to get one of those spots. It's not a group of people sitting there and say, this team's better than that team, because quite honestly, they don't know that. And it's not their fault because no one really knows that unless you go play the game.
So there was elements of the AQ model that candidly I liked. I do like the playing game. I think making championship weekend for all the conferences that much more dramatic because there's more at stake is obviously a great component of that model. Um, the selection committee and the process they go through has been a topic of conversation. And I don't want to dismiss the selection committee from the standpoint of saying it can never get better. And I think we owe the time and effort to roll up our sleeves, to do a full audit of the selection process, and to figure out what's going wrong, Where is it too subjective and where it can be better? And I know we're going to have a deep conversation about that next week when the management committee comes together with, the CFP organization to further discuss it. Mac Rhodes, who obviously is the new chair of the selection committee and part of the Big 12, the AD at Baylor, is committed to making it better. And I know he's been working tirelessly. Last year was his first experience on the selection committee to figure out ways they can modify the process and be less subjective about their decision maker, and to make sure that they're using the right data. Because you're right. I mean, some conferences are playing 8 conference games, others are playing 9.
Right.
I was very outspoken last year. I want to know, how is strength of schedule weighted when you think about all the different metrics?
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of questions. But I did go through a mock session recently. The CFP hosted that for the management committee and the commissioners. It was very eye-opening for me. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of data that's being used. Is it the right data? I don't have an answer for that. But we are going to do an audit. We are going to do a deep dive into the process, and hopefully we can land in a better place.
Commissioner, at the conference level, what's the one thing that maybe the general fan is not talking about that causes you some stress at night, that is something that needs to be handled and tackled?
Well, it's interesting. It's a great question. I take everything home with me. Like you guys, right? It's a 24/7 job and role, and you can never turn it off. There's a lot of the big national issues that we're dealing with, and right now, I would say the big 3 are settlement, CFP, and future governance. And future governance, meaning the role of the NCAA in this new age of collegiate athletics. Something Coach mentioned earlier. Okay, and what role do they play? And how do they get back to doing to overseeing what they do well, which is the academic and athletic experience, i.e., championships that they put on for membership. And then there's the business of the Big 12, which is somewhat connected, but sometimes not. And there's a lot on our plate. When I first got here, we had 23 staff members. In a very short period of time, we're up to 49 now. Because ultimately I'm in the value creation business, and that's what I'm trying to create for our membership. They need more resources. So it's something I'm thinking about every day. But in context, I mean, there's a lot going on in our space right now. And I'm sure everyone knows, but it's not just football and basketball. I mean, we sponsor 25 sports here, 15 of which are women's sports, and we think there's a lot of growth there. So there's a lot to manage and a lot to do. But I will tell you that coming from professional sports, there's nothing like college athletics. It's a purpose-driven industry, and at the core is our student athlete.
Yeah.
So despite all the different things I'm handling on a daily basis, at the center of it all, is it right for the student athlete? And that's what I'm focused on.
Good man.
Thank
Always good to see you, Commissioner.
Always
we
great to
appreciate
see
your
you.
time.
Great
We'll
to
see you. Hey, we'll see you week 2 in Ames, Iowa, at Iowa State. Big noon kickoff.
Rob, by the way, how's your daughter? Does she love TCU?
My son
Your
just
son-
wrapped up his first year at TCU.
TCU.
We drink the purple Kool-Aid, man. We love it. It
He
is
loves
such an
it.
awesome
He had a great
institution.
year.
Couldn't have enjoyed it more. He's spending time
You
covering.
realize if you take Mark to dinner in Boca that you got to Rob and I are not like we're listening. We're here.
Well, guys,
Well, you welcome to come down here anytime you like.
listen, I'm going to take all of you out when I see your names.
Bang.
But when I'm in Boca, Mark, it's convenient.
Coach always trying to rain on my parade. Why you in my compliments? Why you in on my dinners, bro?
Always. We just keep it. Hey, what do they say? What did Dion say? We're keeping receipts, brother.
Keep those receipts, man.
Well, you didn't invite none of us to your Ireland golf trip, so what's up with that?
All right.
Well,
All right.
guys, thank you.
Good point.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yormark, thanks so much. Enjoy your summer, man. I know you got a
You
busy
too.
summer. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, guys.
Welcome back to the Triple Option presented by Wendy's. Urban Mark, Rob Stone here with you. Time now for Treat of the Week presented by Wendy's. Try Wendy's new Frosty Fusions with flavors like Caramel Crunch, Oreo Brownie, and Pop-Tarts Strawberry. Don't sleep on the Pop-Tart Strawberry, by the way. It was really, really good. My kids devoured it. Last week, the National Football Foundation released the candidates for the 2026 College Football Hall of Fame. Coach, congratulations. You're going in this December in Las Vegas with that
Congratulations,
class.
Coach.
Who's going to be joining you next year? Some great names. Our good friend at Fox Sports, Chris Petersen, former TCU head coach Gary Patterson there as well. Jonathan Vilma, Ndamukong Suh, Percy Harvin, Cam Newton, RG3, Marvin Harrison,
Damn, some ball players.
Aaron
Right.
Donald, and then this guy named Mark Ingram II, who's on the list as well. Mark, you got my vote, brother. I signed up. I got a vote, and you got mine, my friend. I hope you get in this year. You should have been in last year.
I appreciate you, man. Yeah, it's just an honor, man. Anytime you have a chance to get recognized for something that that you put blood, sweat, and tears into, it's always an honor and appreciative. And obviously, I feel like I should have been going in with my boy Coach this year,
Yeah.
Coach Meyer and Coach Saban.
And
That
Coach
would've been
Saban.
yeah, that would have been crazy. But man, you talk about the list of guys that you just named. I mean,
Loaded.
to be able to go in possibly with a big bro, Jonathan Vilma, he's like family to me. He was my OG when I got to New Orleans as a rookie. Talk about Ndamukong Suh, the dominant player that he was. Percy Harvin, one of the best players to ever touch the football. Like, he was a different type of guy, man. Then you got Cam Newton, Scam Newton. No,
Barners. Don't be talking about those
I gotta
Barners
throw
yet.
that in there. Cam knows all love. But RG3, Marvin Harrison, Aaron Donald. I mean, come on, man. I that's a legendary class right there. So to be able to go in with some ballers like that, I know we're gonna have a ball if we all get inducted this year. So I'm just looking forward to it, man. It's such a blessing. God is good.
Hanging out with Coach all these years now, I feel like every couple months the name Percy Harvin keeps popping up into a
He was
conversation.
him, man. He was one of them
Man,
ones.
I know how much he means to you, Coach.
Yeah, I've said this, and not many people disagree who watched him or played against him or played with him. That includes Pete Carroll when he had him at
Man.
at the Vikings. But I say this with great respect. I think he's arguably the greatest player to put on a helmet. I mean, when he was healthy, he just had so many injuries. He was a racehorse that when he got dinged, it was just hard for him. But when he was the most violent runner I've ever had, and Mark, he never got hit.
Speed,
You go back,
power, elusiveness.
you go back. He had that. We used to say he's got like eyes in the side and back of his head
Yeah, man.
and he, some guys don't get hit because they slide, or some guys don't get hit because they run out of bounds or whatever. This guy, I've never seen. He was the most violent 4-4. I mean, legit 4-4 with the ball in
Yes.
his hand. He was extremely smart playing at tailback. We direct snapped him in the single wing.
Yes.
And of course, he was an H-back and an outside guy. So he played 4 positions every game for us.
He's a
Outside,
true
inside,
running back, a
back.
punt return, kick return, a true X receiver, a slot receiver, whatever you want him to be. He was one of those ones for sure. That's why, Coach, you say he's one of the best players. From watching football, he was definitely one of the best players to ever touch the football, man. College, NFL, you name it. His highlights are second to none.
So, hey, Mark, I was with Joe Hayden the other day, and we were talking, and Joe Hayden came to Florida to play receiver, H-back. After 5 minutes of practice, he saw Percy. He came to me, he goes, "I'm never going to beat that one out. Can I go play corner?" 5 minutes. So that's in a 10-minute window.
He
I had
saw
one of the best players in NFL history come to me and say, "I can't beat that cat out." And within 5 minutes, he's a starting corner at the University of Florida.
I'm sure Joe Hayden will thank you because he made a lot of money
Yes, he
playing
did.
defensive back.
Yes, he did. Probably took a lot less hits, too. The triple option crystal ball brought to you by BetMGM. The NBA Finals are underway between the Pacers and the Thunder. Here's an offer for basketball fans you won't find anywhere else. Pick the player that you think will score first in the game. If it's not your player, relax. And he scores the second field goal of the game, you get your stake back in cash. So the crystal ball, we're going to go to the SEC and take a look at LSU this week. The over-under regular season wins, 8.5. I'm telling you right now, take the over. They're going over 8.5.
Wow.
The over's being set, at minus 155, the under at plus 120. Real quick, last year, LSU 8-4. They lost to USC, A&M, Bama, and Florida. Had one ranked win over Ole Miss. Why the optimism down there in Baton Rouge? They've got a Heisman candidate under center in Garrett Nussmeier, his 5th year at LSU, second as a starter, second highest Heisman odds behind that guy in Austin, Arch Manning. Last year threw for over 4,000 yards, completed 64% of his passes, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Got to bring that number down. They also returned their leading rusher, their leading receiver, and their leading tackler as well. They made some headway in the transfer portal. Everybody does these days. They brought in some defensive help from FSU and from Florida. Oklahoma wide receiver Nick Anderson, 6'4", injured last year, but remember, as a freshman, 10 touchdowns, 798 yards. So they're going to be really strong. We take a look at their schedule. No Georgia, no Texas on this, but my goodness, does it have a challenging start? And starts have been a problem at LSU under Coach Kelly. They begin at Clemson, Death Valley versus Death Valley, not neutral site. This is in the state of South Carolina at Clemson. That is a tough place to start.
L.
All right, Coach L.
Oh, damn.
Push. You want to put a pin in that one?
0.5.
0.5. All right.
I'm going to have a bunch of 0.5s.
Yeah, that's all right. All right. So then it eases up for one game. Louisiana Tech, let's give them a win. And then dub. And then versus Florida, home to Florida. I'm giving them a dub.
What time?
It's going to be a night game. You know it.
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm going to say a dub for LSU. That's
all right.
tough.
So that's 2. Southeast Louisiana, let's give them 3. At Ole Miss.
0.5.
I'm with Mark. A 4. A 4. Coaches now at around the 0.3. Versus South Carolina.
Dub.
5. At Vandy.
Dub.
6. Versus Texas A&M.
Dub.
7. At Alabama.
L.
We don't even have to ask anymore.
Agree.
We just know what's going to be. So that's 7. Versus Arkansas.
Dub.
8. Remember, it's 8.5 versus Western Kentucky.
Dub.
9. And then at Oklahoma to close.
You just don't know. Their roster is going to be
agree.
redone, and last year they were bad. But
I agree. But
I gave them 9 wins.
We feel pretty good with a 9, don't we?
how about you, Mark?
Dang.
You just fired a 9 winner.
I was about to go under, but I just said 9 wins. So yeah, okay. Brian Kelly, 9 wins. All right.
Here's the thing about Brian Kelly is he's won everywhere. I've always respected him. He's won at Grand Valley, I believe it was, and then in Central Michigan, then Cincinnati, Notre Dame. But the question is, and I've been asked this just by SEC fans, Mark, you know that freaking conference. Is there pressure?
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
Yes,
They are going to be up on a guy so hard. But my God, the guy's coached at Notre Dame. He knows handling pressure. So I got a lot of respect for Brian Kelly.
Stone, but you talked about all the guys we have returning. They lost 2 of their best offensive linemen to the draft. So you got all these quarterbacks and all these skill positions, but can you protect them and can you shore up the offensive line? We don't
totally
know.
fair, but guess what? They got dudes back at the skill positions and accomplished cats. To me, that makes me breathe easier rather than breaking.
No
in some
Georgia,
new
no
quarterback.
Texas.
I don't care who you have at the skill position. If you can't run block and you can't pass block, they can't do nothing.
I'm with you.
So
All right,
we shall see.
Let me throw this question at you real quick. They have lost the season opener the past 5 years. How much does that play in the thinking of the coaching staff, the players, and how much of a setback is losing your first game really in this new day and age of college football?
I don't think the players care. I don't want to speak for
players don't
Mark,
give a
but
damn
players
about
are in
none
and
of
out. The coaching staff, what I would do is evaluate everything that you do over and over and over again from preseason, where you're doing it. I'd change everything. I would, whatever we practiced last year, I'd move. Whatever time we practiced that, I'd change it just because that's the way my mind worked. But I don't know if the players would,
The players don't care
They
about
don't give
that.
a damn.
The players don't care
wanna
about
go
that,
play.
man. They working, they ready to play. But the thing is, they're playing good teams to start the season.
Right.
Who they play last year first? Notre Dame or was that A&M?
USC, I think. USC, right?
USC, yeah. Now you got Clemson. So when you play top teams that are ranked high, you have the potential to take an L in the first game. So when you play that first game, it's all about who makes the least amount of mistakes. So you go back to fundamentals, you go back to studying the film, and you go back to who cannot beat themselves. The team who plays the most fundamentally sound, the least amount of penalties, will most likely win the game in week 1. So
Coach,
that's
did
what
you
have to
like
do.
starting your season with a big dog on your schedule, or did you like to maybe ease into it with a week or 2?
That's a great question. It depends on what kind of team I had. If I had a returning quarterback, let's go. If I had a young buck, I'd rather wait a couple weeks, let them get the feet underneath themselves. So it depends what kind of team. I'll tell you what it does, though. It makes that week of August training camp very serious.
For sure.
Yeah.
When you start with 3 dogs, or 3 easier teams, man, I used to carry, if I looked at our schedule and our players would kind of know after a while, but I would actually use some of those early games as scrimmages in my mind. That's the way, because there's only so many hits a player can take. But if you're playing Clemson at Clemson, you better have your scrimmages in the bank 2 weeks before that game.
Yeah.
So that means you got to go hard early on and then back off, or they'll be blown out by the time you play that game.
Season's getting closer, man. Season's getting closer. We're talking about some of these big week 1 matchups. LSU at Clemson, of course. Texas at Ohio State as well. Make sure to follow, subscribe, rate us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on social media at 3X Option Show. As always, thanks to our amazing sponsors, ZipRecruiter, BetMGM, and Wendy's, and we will see you next week.